Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Road to an Effective Classroom Environment. I am your host, Dr. LaShanta, also known as that classy, sassy consultant. Welcome back. It's been a little bit of time since we have talked about an important topic as it relates to our school environment, whether it be the classroom, the school itself, or the school district. But we are back before you again with another topic, which will be the power of visible learning in CTE classrooms. So that is our topic for today, the power of visible learning in CTE classrooms. And so this is something that is a very, very powerful concept, and it's not just a coin phrase. It's not just something that is fluff ideas or fluff word. Visible learning is about deep understanding of what is going on in the classroom and how students are learning. So we're going to take a look at how this transformational thinking, how it affects and impacts the way our students learn and how they achieve. And visible learning isn't just about what happens in the classroom. And this podcast, we talk about the classroom, when we talk about the interactions and between teachers and students and administration, support staff. But our podcast has expanded into going beyond just the classroom, but we also talk about how concepts within the school itself, the school district, the school community. We talk about a lot of different things that have an impact, whether directly or indirectly, on the classroom environment. So visible learning is not just what happens in the classroom, but it's about making learning seen, heard, and understood by every student. All right. So there was before I move on, there was a one day I was going into a classroom, and I was conducting a walkthrough, and one of the students, the class was actually doing hair coloring, and one of the students looked up and was talking with me about what she was doing, and she said to me, "I finally get it. I understand why if we don't do this step, why this step can cause your hair to not be this burgundy color, and why it could possibly turn green or orange." So she got it, and she got it because the teacher set up the learning intention and the success criteria and explained all of that prior to the lesson and throughout the lesson, which helps support the students' understanding. So we're going to talk about what visible learning is and exactly what that looks like in a CTE classroom. So, what exactly is visible learning? This is a term that comes from the research of John Hattie, in which this is the idea that learning becomes more powerful when both the teacher and the student clearly understand what's being learned, why it matters, and how success will be measured. So you may be asking yourself, well, why is it important that the teacher clearly understands? Isn't the student the one who's learning the material? Exactly. The student is learning the material. But if the teacher cannot articulate effectively why the students are learning this material, why it's being learned, why it matters, and just knowing when that student has gotten it. If the teacher cannot do those things in supporting the student learning, then the student learning is not really going to happen the way that it should. You see, for our young people as well as our older people, because our adult learners, this is important for them as well. But with our focus on our student learners right now, our students, they need to understand, why am I learning about the Cold War? What is the relevance to the Cold War to me now? Why am I learning why or what ingredients make um, make yeast or make a cake rise? Why is it important that a cake rises? Why is that important? What ingredients do I need to know about in order to know this cake is going to rise or this cake is not going to rise because of the type that it is? So, teachers need to be able to articulate the learning. So, teachers need to understand processes. Visible learning is about those processes and why the processes matter, why the content matters. And if we are not able to tell our young people why this information is relevant, other than if you don't learn this information, you won't get a high school diploma. Or if you don't learn this information, then you will not go from seventh grade ELA to eighth grade ELA. We have got to get into the intentional routines of letting our students know exactly why the learning is important. And it goes beyond just saying, because I said so, or because the state says so. Whatever state that you're in, you need to be able to pass all of these different tests, these regents tests, um, whatever the assessment is. We need to be able to tell our students it's not about an assessment that will take you on to the next level. It is about you grasping the learning, because if the students are invested in the learning process and students are pulled in to the lesson because they have highly engaging strategies that are being used by the teachers, then our students are going to be successful no matter what. No matter what the assessment is, because they have gotten involved in the learning and they understand the why and the process. In CTE, when we look at visible learning is a concept that shines. It shines above so many things because visible learning allows in CTE education the connection between academic skills and real world applications. You have where you have to understand basic math and fractions in the welding class in order to be able to work on a project in which a you're building a prototype that is needed for the city of Columbia, the city of Charleston. You've got to be able to apply those academic skills, reading, writing, social studies, science, all of those skills, the academic skills from the traditional world, and combine it with the real world application, which is in the lab setting, the kitchen areas, and so forth when it comes to CTE. So this is where visible learning shines and pulling those, making those connections between these two worlds. When students can articulate what they're doing, guess what? And they can articulate the why they're doing it and what they're doing, then they can go from being engaged in completing a task to understanding the task. And that's what you want. You don't just want a ritualistic compliance from a student. They're completing a task, but they don't know why they're completing it, other than I'm going to get a grade. Students should not just want to complete this task because they know they're getting a grade for the assignment, but they want to complete the task because they understand that if they complete this task and they're successful, then they can go on to the next task, which will build onto their knowledge. All right. So let's take a look at making learning visible. What do we look at? What does that look like in making learning visible? So we're going to talk about 5 powerful strategies that are used in visible learning. And the first strategy is learning intention. Second one is success criteria. Third one is modeling and think aloud. The fourth one is student reflection. And then the fifth one is peer feedback. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of those. So, what are learning intentions? Learning intentions, the best way to describe learning intentions is that these are phrases that set the tone and the purpose for the lesson. And you may be thinking, is that like an objective? Learning intentions go deeper than just being an objective. Because if you remember from 20, 30 years ago when the buzzword was objectives, you were able to write out, you would have identify the common denominator in fractions, just as an example. With a learning intention, you are putting the learning onto the student by starting off the phrase with, we are learning to identify what a common denominator is. We are learning to identify what a numerator is. So the learning intention puts the learning on the student and starting off with, this is what we are learning. It's more personable. And that's what visible learning is about as well, is making the learning personable to the student. We are learning to, whatever that lesson is, you're setting the tone, setting the stage for the purpose, for why the students are in that classroom, in those seats for that particular moment in time. Success criteria. Success criteria are These are statements that many times are formed as I can statements for students, in which the teacher will indicate to the student, I can, I, I can successfully identify what a numerator and a denominator look like, or where a numerator and a denominator fall within a problem. So when you're talking about success criteria, you are breaking down the learning intention even more. You may do a step by step that breaks down that learning intention. So the learning intention is overarching idea of what the learning will be, and then the success criteria is broken down even further. And if it doesn't start off with an I can statement, sometimes you may see these statements written as, we will know we are successful when, and it adds accountability to the student. You will know you are successful in learning this concept, this idea, when you are able to do A, B, C, D, so forth and so on. All right. So the learning intention is the overarching idea. Our success criteria measures, it's a measurement of success. The students will know that they are able to do what they said they can do when they can do X, Y, Z, or A, B, C, D, and so forth. Modeling and think alouds. Invisible learning, when you verbalize your thinking process, you are teaching students how to think like professionals. So many times we may see where students, they're able to write out information, they're able to write out what they're thinking. They may be able to regurgitate or do more recall, but visible learning goes beyond that. When teachers model what they want the students to be able to do, this gives them a visual of what the expectations are in the learning. Being able to verbalize that thinking process is very, very important. So thinking through step by step, what am I doing? How am I achieving this next thing? For example, I was in a classroom this week where the teacher was showing students how to make tacos. And so the instruction began in the classroom, and that this has been building up to a lesson and looking at the temperature of ground beef and of other different types of meats. But for this particular demonstration, it was ground beef. and the students had to know exactly the temperature that the ground beef needed to be so that all of the bacteria, you didn't have bacteria, you didn't have where undercooked, the meat was undercooked and so forth. And so the teacher modeled how to have a sanitized station, how to keep your area clean, how to retrieve items, as well as the process of browning the ground beef. So it just wasn't about, oh, we're making tacos, but it was a step by step demonstration of everything that needs to be done in order to get to this final product. So the teacher modeled what the students were going to do, as well as the students had to verbalize during the demonstration what the next step was and what was upcoming. So modeling and think alouds are very important when it comes to visible learning. Student reflection. I am a big fan of reflection, and I've talked about it in other episodes of the podcast. Student reflections allow the teacher to know whether or not the students they got it before they leave the room. Student reflections can be exit tickets. They could be journaling. You could have students to do some type of digital reflection in which they may have to scan a QR code and then answer a question or tell you exactly what their takeaways from the lesson are, or even if there was something that they needed more information in order to grasp a concept. So student reflection is very important in visible learning because it gives you an idea as that classroom teacher. It gives you an idea of where the students their thinking process is before leaving that classroom, or once they've left. You have an opportunity to read over those reflections and see exactly where you need to go back and backtrack if needed, or you may need to speed up in your lesson because you see where the students are able to keep up and the pace can be picked up. So student reflections give quality information to teachers. It gives quality data to teachers that they need for their next lesson. And then the last powerful strategy when it comes to making learning visible in the classroom is peer feedback. So in CTE, collaboration, it mirrors the workplace. Students have to learn to work with each other. They're learning from each other, not just the teacher. So they're working together, collaborating, and learning, and they're learning from the teacher as well as they're learning from each other, just as they would if they were in the workplace itself. So peer feedback is very important. It is amazing to go into a classroom, in a CTE classroom, and see other students who have mastered a concept, who are helping other students to see where their thinking may have they may have dropped an idea, they may have forgotten something, but to see other students leading other students in the work is very, very powerful. And having those student leaders in the classroom who have grasped the concept, because many times we think that all learning has to come from the teacher. It doesn't. We have students that they're able to grasp the concepts and they are able to help and assist others. Again, of course, as the teacher is observing the process and they are facilitating the discussions that are taking place, because again, the teacher is still a part of this learning process. They are a part of this, and they need to make sure that the students are also giving the correct information. It's that accountability piece. So those are the five powerful strategies when it comes to making learning visible. Having great learning intentions, starting off with that overarching idea of what the learning is going to be about for the day. Having the success criteria, which will, it's more of an assessment for the student. The student will know that he or she is successful in learning the idea when they are able to add on dot 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 dot. Um, Modeling and think alouds. That was our third powerful strategy: student reflection and peer feedback. All right, so let's talk about instruction to outcomes. So we're going to look at connecting instruction and connecting visible learning to student outcomes. So many times we focus on the tasks that we're doing. We have our students are focused on finishing a project, completing a worksheet, passing a test. I talked about this a few minutes ago. But the true learning is looking at the outcome, not the activity itself. Visible learning transforms instruction by making it measurable. You will see improvements with your students in their learning when you can see their skill proficiency, when you see that confidence build, when you see them engaged in the lesson, and then when you see that they're ready to take their certifications. In CTE, students have the opportunity to walk out of the doors before they even get their high school diploma. They are able to walk away with several types of certifications, the same type of certifications that the adults in the adult workplace that they're getting in order to be able to do what they do on their jobs. And so that is the power of CTE, these certifications, making sure the certification readiness is there. Because when the learning is visible, the students can be prepared to for their certification tests and be able to have several certifications, and they have already gotten themselves in a position where they are very valuable to employers if they decide that they want to go straight into employment, into the workforce, versus going on to other outlets such as the military or going to a junior college or to a four-year university. So visible learning transforms instruction by making it measurable, and you will see the improvements in skill proficiency, confidence, engagement, and certification readiness. There's nothing like seeing a student confident about the work that they're doing in CTE, in that CTE classroom. When students begin to take ownership of their progress, that is the beauty of visible learning. They take ownership of their progress. They begin to say, I know I can do this because I understand it. That is a powerful, powerful statement. I know I can do this because I understand it. And what better way to end a day in the classroom and knowing that your students are saying, I got it. I got it because I understand it. I can see the process. I can see the steps. I understand why the steps are as they are. If you don't do this step, then you will not be able to go to the next level. So that is the power of visible learning. So before I wrap up, I want to leave you with a question, a reflection question. When your students walk into your classroom, what do they see? Do they see a list of tasks and what they're going to do for the day, like an agenda? Or do they see a pathway to learning? Now, I'm not against agendas because agendas are important. But think about your classroom right now. If you were a classroom teacher, when they walk in your room, do they see a list of what they're going to do for the day? We're going to do worksheet 6.3. Then we're going to take a pop, or you wouldn't write pop quiz on the board, but you might. Then pop quiz. So after the pop quiz, then we're going to read in the chapter. There's nothing wrong with an agenda. Agendas serve a purpose. But how beautiful would it be to have your learning intention success criteria on the board and have that listed, and only that? That gives the students an understanding. It does give them an understanding of what they're going to do. Sometimes when you list a task when you have a list of tasks for students, then they have already summed up what the class period is going to be like before the class starts. So you want some curiosity involved in your class, right? You want a little bit of curiosity so that you can have more engagement. Keep the students guessing about what it's going to look like when they come in there. Not guessing about the learning and what they are going to learn, but guessing about what is going to happen. Keep that curiosity built up. Visible learning makes the process transparent. When when the students know what they're going to learn about, they may not know how they're going to get there, but they have an idea. Oh, this has piqued my curiosity. I wonder what we're going to actually do in order for me to understand this particular concept. But visible learning makes that process transparent to the students. It empowers teachers and it empowers them to have clarity. Teacher clarity is important. That may be the next topic, which we could have started with teacher clarity and then built on to visible learning, but we can always go back and look at teacher clarity for another episode. But teacher clarity is important. It does empower teachers when they are able to clearly show students the learning, show them, model and open the eyes of the students as to what they're going to do. That is very powerful. If you're looking to take one step today with visible learning, start off small. Start off with writing a clear learning intention on your board tomorrow and then revisit it at the end of class. What I tell my teachers is that learning intention, success criteria, you want to keep that in the forefront of the student's mind. You don't just want to write it on the board. Putting a learning intention, success criteria up on the board is important for students to see it visually and for it to stay there and for you to verbally refer to it throughout the lesson. It is not about putting it up there for administration because visible learning is not about a dog and pony show as they used to be called back in the day. And in some places, it may still be called a dog and pony show when administration comes to do a walkthrough. But we are in there to be coaches and to support you. When we're not wearing our evaluation hat, we are there to support and coach you to greatness. A quote from John Hattie from his book, Visible Learning for Teachers, Maximizing Impact on Learning. One quote that I thought was very powerful. He said that the aim is to get the students actively involved in seeking evidence to their role. And it's not simply to do the task as decided by teachers, but to actively manage and understand their learning gains. Our students should be actively managing and understanding their learning gains, not their learning losses, but their learning gains. And so, one other final point that I want to make before we close out. Visible learning isn't just a trend. It's not just a trend, but it is a mindset. There is a whole new series that focuses on the mindset of different people who are involved in the learning process. Again, visible learning is not just about the students understanding, but there's also the teacher understanding, the parent, the community. There are a lot of different elements to understanding when we're talking about mindset. So there is a whole different series of books out there that have been published about mindset. So that'll be another episode as well. But visible learning is a mindset. It's about making growth visible, measurable, and meaningful. So that is all for us for today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with another educator or a school leader and someone who's ready to elevate their teaching practices. Share any of the podcast episodes. And I wanted to also just to let you know, you can visit my website, leejanesconsultingllc.com, to explore consulting, coaching, and any upcoming professional development opportunities that I have out there for you. But by all means, please make sure that you have an opportunity to go to that website, leejanesconsultingllc.com, for all of the information and to see what's going on with Dr. LaShanta, also known as that classy, sassy consultant. So until next time, lead with purpose, teach with passion, and stay classy and sassy. Bye bye now.